Hey guys, that's a lot of candy. I mean, that's a whole lot of candy. So, have you ever felt like you've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting? Well, we're going to talk about that today. But it's time for worship. So get ready. Hope you're prayed up. Let's worship God. See ya.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
You give life.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour
I see the work of your hands, galaxies spinning a heavenly dance. Oh God, all that you are is so overwhelming. And I hear the sound of your voice. All at once it's a gentle and thundering noise. Oh God, all that you are is so overwhelming. I delight myself in you, captivated by your beauty. I'm overwhelmed by you. And God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. I know the power of your cross, forgiven and free, forever you'll be my God. And all that you've done is so overwhelming. I delight myself in you, in the glory of your presence. I'm overwhelmed by you. And God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. You are beautiful, you are beautiful, oh God, there is no one more beautiful. You are beautiful, God, you are the most beautiful. And you are wonderful, oh God, there is no one more wonderful. You are wonderful, God, you are the most wonderful. Yes, you are glorious, oh God, there is no one more glorious. You are glorious, God, you are the most glorious. I delight myself in you, in the glory of your presence. I'm overwhelmed by you. And God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. I'm overwhelmed by you. There is no one more beautiful. God, you are the most beautiful.
Welcome back in after worship. I hope you guys were really worshiping God in those times. And those songs just mean a lot to me. So we're talking about waiting. And I know you may have waited before in your lifetime. I've waited before in my lifetime. I've waited in places just like this one. You ever waited in the car? Man, it can be really tough. I've waited in traffic jams and it's been annoying. I've waited at red lights and it's annoying. I've waited for a vacation to start. I've waited for a vacation to be over. I've waited for a drive to be done. I think we're all used to this idea of waiting. Well, Paul, he had to wait in our story today. So in Acts like 23, 24, and a bunch of the chapters all surrounding there's this interesting story about how Paul was preaching in the temple, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees decided they're ready to take him out. They're done with the dude, they're done with him, they want him done, and so they send him to be killed. And the governor's like, I don't really think that's going to be the plan. And they said, no, the one that's over Jerusalem said that's got to be, we need to think this through. And Paul was kind of claiming that he was a Roman citizen, which he was, and so the rules for them were a little stricter and stronger, and it had to be a crime against Rome in order for them to be killed. And so the Sadducees and the Pharisees are trying to prove this thing, and it's not working out for them, it's working out for Paul pretty well. And so he's going to be sent, and he's supposed to go on trial, and they have this plot that they basically form that says they're going to kill him. When he's being transported from the jail to his trial, they're just going to kill him, be done with it. Well, they gets word to the Roman government about this. The Roman government's like, you're not killing a Roman citizen on our watch. And they actually take him with hundreds of soldiers and all this kind of stuff. They take him to Governor Felix. And so Governor Felix is over the whole region, not just the city of Jerusalem, but over the whole region. And so Paul's taken to him. And when Paul gets there, he kind of explains his case a little bit. Governor Felix says, stop, we're going to wait until your accusers get here. So Paul waits for 5 days in kind of a Roman jail kind of thing. He waits for 5 days. And so finally the high priest and the ones that are accusing him show up. They're accusing all these things, but they have no proof because none of it's real. It's all made up. And so they realize they don't have any proof, and the governor realizes they don't have any proof. And so Paul preaches. He gets to preach a gospel message. And in Acts 23, it talks about this amazing gospel message that he preaches to Felix, Governor Felix. And Governor Felix isn't sure what to do. He's kind of torn because here you have this religious group that they're trying to keep happy so there's no rebellion in the kingdom. But then you also have this guy that's pretty much innocent and is a Roman citizen, and so he's kind of torn. And so here's what he does. That's what he does. Number one, that was an awkward, long silence, wasn't it? Well, the Bible says that he talks to Paul every once in a while, and he keeps on trying to talk to him because he's hoping that Paul will offer him a bribe. Paul never does. Paul just enjoys preaching. And so Paul's preaching and preaching and preaching every time he's called before him. So Felix is eventually moved out of the region as governor, and a new governor named Festus comes in. Governor Festus. And here's the deal. At the end of 23, it gives this short little verse, and it says, 2 years later, Felix leaves, and Festus comes in as governor, and Felix has done nothing with Paul because he doesn't want to upset the Jewish leaders. So Paul's just been sitting, not being able to do anything but maybe talk to a few people that come around. He's been sitting in their version of a jail. No trial, not convicted of anything, awaiting decision by the governor who refuses to make decisions and just waits. So, waiting reminds me of this. It's one of my funny little videos that I enjoy showing you guys. And so, check this out. So, was that what you expected when you first saw the waiting game? No, I didn't think so. So waiting is a big deal. So Paul's waiting in jail Festus shows up. Begins the next chapter. Festus shows up, new governor. Paul gives him the same speech, talks about Jesus and the resurrection and all these different things and how his life can be changed by God and by Jesus, and there's redemption, and he gives this whole thing. Well, Festus doesn't know what to do with him either. And so Festus is kind of trying to figure out what to do, and then the people of the Jewish community was like, hey, just send him back to us. We'll put him on trial and take care of him. And Festus, knowing that's not really what's going to happen, what's going to happen is he's going to get killed. That's what's going to happen. You're just going to kill him. And there was even a plot that was brought to his attention that, yeah, if he gets sent to the Jewish community, on the way they're going to be attacked by unknown people, and Paul's going to get killed. So he's like, well, that's not going to work. Well, then the king of that area, King Agrippa, he's coming through. And so Festus is like, sweet, I'm going to pass this off on him. And so he's trying to figure out what to do, and Paul, somewhere in the middle of all this, Paul says, listen, I appeal to Caesar, which means as a Roman citizen, I choose to I want to be in Rome when this trial. It's basically our version of, I want to take this to the Supreme Court. And so all this happens, and so a King Agrippa comes in, and they give her things, and there's no evidence. And then Paul, he gives this amazing speech, and he says, King Agrippa, I know you know about the Jewish people. Festus didn't, so I didn't go into the whole thing, but you do. And so he goes down through and shows how Jesus was in the scriptures and all these different things. And Agrippa is struck to the heart because he realizes this man is innocent. There's nothing that he deserves to die for in all of this. But we can't upset the Jewish people, so what to do? And he says basically to Festus, if he hadn't appealed to Caesar, we should be able to let him go. But Festus says he did, and this is probably the best way to wash our hands of this whole thing. And so they send him by boat to head to Rome. And they send him off. And there's all sorts of adventures. Eventually their boat gets shipwrecked, and there's a snake that attacks Paul. And I mean, there's all sorts of craziness that happens in the days ahead for Paul. But here's what I want to focus on was those 2 years. Those 2 years of impressive waiting. So we're going to talk about this in group, but what is the longest you've waited? What's the longest you've waited for something that you wanted? Think about it. I've waited for some stuff for a long time. Presents I wanted to get, saving up for something, all sorts of fun things. Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a long drive and you can't wait to see somebody on the other side of the drive. Well, not recently, but back in the day. How long have you waited? Paul waited to hear his fate for 2 years. And when they were being wishy-washy from that point, you know what Paul did? Paul said, fine, I will push this further because I want to be talking to as many people as I can talk about for Jesus. And so Paul pushes it even further into the future. So what about you? What do you wait on? Here's what I think we should pull from this story. Paul, he waited in God's timing. And he knew that he was supposed to be going to Rome eventually and being a missionary. He knew he wanted to go to Rome and speak to the most powerful country on earth. He knew that he wanted that to be his platform because that's the platform Jesus deserved. But he also knew he had to wait on God's timing. And so he preached to the audience that was before him. He preached and spoke to the audience that was directly in front of him. And when there was a time, there was a season where he had to wait and just, oh man, you and I, we're tearing our hair out after a few weeks, a couple months in quarantine. Imagine 2 years where you haven't even had a trial yet. You're not even really in prison yet. You're just in ball. Paul waits for 2 years. And every time he's brought out to speak to one of the governors, to speak to the king, every time he's brought out, he stays focused on the mission of God. He waited in faith. We're going into a season where some of us are going to have to wait for things. We're waiting for what the summer's going to look like. We're waiting for what the fall's going to look like. We're waiting on what our new school or a different school, or we're changing from middle school to high school, or we're waiting on something. We're waiting on celebrations. We're waiting to see people again. We're waiting. My question is, can you be bold in your waiting? And that looks like, you know what? I trust God in this. That's bold. Trusting God to a corrupt political system that threw you in jail and forgot about you for 2 years, that's pretty bold. Can you be bold in the waiting? And what about when things should really worry you? He was going to Rome, which had the ability to kill him, even though he was a Roman citizen. He was going to Rome that, man, if there was a threat to their power, they took him out in a heartbeat. He was going to Rome that did eventually kill him. But he was willing to put the worrying about the future into God's hands. Can you be bold in the waiting and be bold when life is worrying? Maybe life is worrying you right now. You're not sure what the future holds. Can you be bold in your faith in the worry? It's not that the worry goes away. It's that in your worry, you say, I trust God in this terrifying moment. I trust God when I don't know what the next step is, or even when I'll get to take it. Bold in the waiting and the worrying. Paul was. We can be. Will you be? We'll see you in groups.